You've heard me say it before that the ego is not an entity, but it's an activity. And one of the primary activities of ego is ownership. It's this ownership that really possesses the activity of consciousness. There's not even separate activities. There's just one activity. Just like there's one consciousness. Well, this one activity is made of consciousness. And this activity expresses itself as what we call ego. Now, if we can zoom in on this activity of ego really comes down to identification. And the identification is really intertwined with ownership. This possessing what appears to be things. It's my car, my microphone, my camera, my wife, my children, my home, my education. Just look at how much you say my, the me and the my. This is me and this is my life. So it's this possessing activity, this ownership. That there's really just this one activity. It's like a movement. It's one movement. But there's also what appears to be this other movement. And it's not separate from the first movement. There's really not a first and second movement here. It's so challenging to speak about. So let's make it more experiential. That you're just sitting here, being with me. And you may notice thoughts appearing. Maybe some emotions are arising. So these thoughts, it's this movement of thinking. These emotions, it's this movement of feeling. Now it appears to be two separate movements, like a flow of thoughts and a flow of emotions. You could see it as more of a current. There's a current of thoughts, there's a current of emotions. But it's all appearing in the movement of the ocean. There's just one ocean and one movement. It's only when we really zoom in and slice and dice and say this is that wave and that's another wave that we create this separation. And I'm kind of doing that in this video actually, to just point out this ownership, this movement of possession. So maybe you experience these thoughts right now. Maybe you are experiencing some emotions right now. And now there is an afterthought that then says, those are my thoughts. Those are my emotions. And that's the ownership movement that I'm pointing out. This me and my, this identification and possessing, that they're really inseparable, because if you weren't possessing anything, if nothing was yours, would there even be a you, a me, as a separate entity? Take away everything from you, including your body, your thoughts, your feelings. And is there you? No. There's not a you as a separate entity. There's not a me. If all of the things that you own, the my thoughts, my feelings, my body, my mind, my family, if all of that disappears, well, there's not really a me. The me and the my are inseparable. But have a look. When there's this movement of thinking, are they not just thoughts? When there's the movement of feeling, are they not just feelings? They are. And there's no separate me that is an owner of the thoughts. There's not a separate me that's an owner of the feelings. My thoughts, my feelings is nothing but another thought. And it's that ownership that really strengthens that sense of me. Because if you just see them as thoughts and not my thoughts, if you just see them as feelings and not my feelings, you'll notice that that sense of me isn't so strong. The more you seem to be owning, the stronger the sense of me. It's as if you're protecting all of your possessions. This is why people say things like, the more you own, the more enslaved you are to it. It's this ownership activity that strengthens this bondage. Everything that you're owning is then a limitation that strengthens this sense of separation. That you can only own things that appear to be separate from you. But by coming to see that this ownership activity is an afterthought, that when you are actually experiencing thoughts, they're just simply the experience of thoughts. When you're experiencing feelings, there's just the experience of feelings. And then there's this afterthought. Those are my thoughts. Those are my feelings. I don't want to feel those type of thoughts in my head. I don't want to feel those type of feelings in my body. It just continues. There's this ownership, this possessing. Even when we hear things like you are consciousness, or consciousness being spoken about, then all of a sudden there's my consciousness, my awareness, my presence, my silence, my stillness, my happiness, my suffering. This ownership activity is the activity of the separate self. Because whenever we look for the owner, we can't find an owner. So simply become aware of all of this ownership talk. But don't just stop there. Go one step further. Where's the owner? Where's the owner? My thoughts, my feelings. Where's the owner of those thoughts? Where's the owner of those feelings? My relationships, my job, my career. But we can't find the owner. Without an owner, can there be any ownership? Without an owner, can you really lose anything? Can you lose something that you've never owned? So have a look for the owner. Realize there is no owner. All of these problems are a problem for the one that owns the problems. Problems are always personal. If you aren't the owner of the problems, they're not your problems. Things appear to be problems from the perspective of a owner, from the perspective of a limited sense of self, a limited self. So a limited self sees problems. The limitless self sees possibilities. So become aware of all of this me and my talk, and just simply look for the one that's the owner of all of this. And when you realize that there is no owner, you experience freedom. You're no longer owning problems. You're no longer owning unhappiness, owning suffering. You're no longer owning misery. So in a way, it's this freedom from ownership, which sounds scary to the illusionary owner. So if there's something in you that feels very triggered or frightened or afraid, when I say that, we'll just see that that's just a feeling. But there's no one that owns that feeling. Just simply be with that feeling. Experience it fully. There's only the awareness that is aware of the feeling. And that's your direct experience. That what you are is the awareness. And there's an awareness of the feeling, this resistance, this fear, this feeling of being threatened by this discussion. But use this discussion not just to hear what I'm saying, but actually explore right here, right now, that there's just a feeling that seems to be on behalf of someone that owns this feeling. But beyond the feeling, there is no separate entity that is possessing this feeling, that owns this feeling, that this feeling is on behalf of. That's the bluff. That's the illusion. That if you just experience this feeling as it is, without adding anything to it, like a story, without the afterthought, there is no separate me. There's just simply this feeling. There's just simply the awareness of it. There's just simply what's happening. There's no separate entity that is owning what is happening. And you realize that without an owner, without owning anything, you are absolutely free. And this freedom is everything. You don't own anything because you are everything. Hopefully this helps. See you in the next one.